Hello, everyone. I am Neeru Bali, and as a university counselor, I frequently come across students passionate about studying psychology. And today, I am happy to discuss this topic with renowned psychologist and faculty of Flame University, Dr. Ninad Patwardhan. Dr. Patwardhan holds a doctorate degree in humanities and social sciences psychology from IIT Bombay. He's a gold medalist in both bachelor's and master's in psychology program. Dr. Patwardhan has taught courses such as cognitive psychology, personality and individual differences, psychology of war of Mahabharat, and psychological testing and assessment. He's also a well-known figure in many national and international conferences. Welcome, Dr. Patwardhan.
Thank you, Ms. Neeru, for an amazing introduction. In today's presentation, I'm going to focus on what it means to study psychology at Flame University and what are the different career options that you can pursue with a higher education in psychology. So I'm going to start my presentation now. Okay, so in today's presentation, as I said, I'm going to talk about what it means to study psychology at Flame and particularly from a liberal education perspective. And after that, I'm going to talk about careers in psychology. Now, often people ask me this question, how different is it to study psychology in a liberal education curriculum as compared to studying psychology in a regular arts college? And the answer to this lies in Bloom's taxonomy. Now, if you look at, for instance, regular arts program, they typically focus on skill sets which are at the bottom of this pyramid, namely knowledge and comprehension. So typically students focus on, for instance, taking down notes, memorizing the information, and then regurgitating the same in the exams. But in a liberal education curriculum, we go steps ahead of these skills. So we focus on applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information. So when I talk about application, I'm talking about how can the theories, concepts, and principles of psychology be used in everyday life. Analysis involves breaking the information into several parts and examining each part in detail. When I talk about synthesis, it's about inculcating or integrating all the information that's available to you into coherent framework and then generating new insights. And when I talk about evaluation, it involves justifying a decision or a course of action and even the information that is available to you. So the four skills, analysis, application, synthesis, and evaluation, is something that we strongly emphasize in the liberal education curriculum. Now, for instance, you may ask, so what are the assignments that correspond to each of these skills? So, for instance, in when it comes to application, the assignment that, for instance, I give in one of my courses is to ask students to design a product or an intervention based on, for instance, the personality profile of a particular individual. Now, analysis, it involves breaking the information into small parts and examining each part in detail. So, for instance, students could be given a movie or a novel or a case study or an interview, and they have to analyze the interview for its to extract relevant themes. The third component is evaluation. Now, as I said, evaluation requires you to critique and examine the information presented to you. So, for instance, students may be asked to write an argumentative essay. They are supposed to examine different perspectives on an issue and then evaluate different viewpoints, or they could also be asked to write a critical essay in which they examine pros and cons of a particular piece of argument or a particular theme. And when I talk about synthesis, students typically are asked to write a review paper which tries to integrate information from several sources into a coherent framework and then come up with new insights which can be later tested empirically. So, what are the different activities that we do at the liberal education program, especially when it comes to studying psychology? So, one thing that we emphasize particularly is that no matter which assignment you do, it is grounded in research. So research papers are given to students to read, to analyze, and to critique right since they enter college. And this is something which is going to build the higher order skills that I talked about in the previous slides. Now, we also encourage students to conduct research studies, which means students have to go on field or interview people and collect data. But what do we do with the data that we get? We have to analyze it. And now, because we are living in a world where technology has permeated almost every sphere of human functioning, we use softwares to analyze data. So the softwares that we use typically are SPSS, NVivo, and even R. Now, also, I'm sure many of you may have taken certain tests when you went to a career counselor, right? For instance, a personality test or maybe an interest test or an aptitude test. So we also train you in terms of how to administer, score, and interpret psychometric assessments. So for instance, tests like 16PF, NEO-PIR, which are some of the personality tests. Also, other important thing that we emphasize in the psychology program is experiential learning, right? Now, what I hear, I remember for a short time, but what I do, I remember forever. So, in fact, students are expected to be active participants in the learning process. So, they are encouraged to, for instance, make ads or films or even engage in storytelling sessions, play games, engage in role plays, and so on. And in every class, students engage in discussions with the professors on important issues. So class discussions at Flame are extremely rigorous, and we encourage students to be more analytical and more critical when they raise their point of view. Now, what are the courses that we teach in the psychology program at Flame? So we have a three-tier model of psychology courses. One is the gateway courses, which every psychology major has to complete. And these two courses are Introduction to Psychology and Methods in Psychology. We also like expose students to core courses such as Social Psychology, which basically tries to understand how human beings behave in social situations. We also teach personality psychology, experimental psychology, and many such core courses. And then we have a set of elective courses such as positive psychology, which tries to talk about, for instance, what are the attributes or qualities that help human beings thrive and flourish. Okay, we also like teach courses like cross-cultural psychology, community psychology, and so on. Now, as times change, especially like in pandemic times, okay, psychology as a discipline has become even more relevant. So we try to make this discipline as contemporary as possible. So we're also teaching some new courses in psychology, such as psychology of self and identity, psychology and the environment, and psychology and the media. So you may ask, Ninad sir, you have given us so much of information, introduced so many concepts, but you have to tell us how do you teach psychology in class. So I'm going to do one short demo with you to help you understand how I teach psychology. Now think about it, like we all are exposed to information from almost every possible source, be it from WhatsApp, from the internet, from hearsay basis, and so on. But can we process all the information that we have access to? No, because our information processing capacity is quite limited. Now, the question is, if our processing capacity is limited and we have too much information in front of us, what do we do? So, many people use what are called heuristics or mental shortcuts, and they even rely on cognitive biases when they have to make important decisions. Okay, so in this presentation, demo session, I'm going to talk about two prominent biases, namely representativeness heuristic and confirmation bias. So I'm going to present you with some situations, and I want the audience to type in their responses in the comment section. Okay, so here's the first situation. I want you to enter your response in the appropriate section. So if I were to conduct many rounds of the game, of which distribution do you think will there be more results? Of distribution 1 or of distribution 2? So if I were to ask this question to many people, they would say it's distribution 1 but not distribution 2. Any guesses why? Because in distribution 2, okay, the outcome appears to be quite organized, right? Now, if for instance you were to distribute 20 marbles at random among 5 children, the number of marbles that each children could get, you think would be different, right? किसी को 4 मिलेगा, किसी को 5 मिलेगा, किसी को 2 मिलेगा, किसी को 3 मिलेगा, right? So in that case, many people think that the outcomes which look random are more likely than the outcomes which are organized. But in actuality, both the outcomes are equally likely. Okay, so this is one important principle of representativeness heuristic, and that is random looking outcomes often people judge to be more likely than the ones which are organized. I'm also going to present you with another situation. I want you to indicate your responses to this situation. Okay, so if I were to ask this question to many people, they would say it's about the same. But if you look at this situation carefully, right? Now, as you know, 50% of all babies are boys, which means this proportion is more likely to be actually maintained in a larger sample than a smaller one. Okay, so which means the chances of fluctuations or deviations from this percent, okay, is much more likely in smaller hospitals as compared to larger ones. But many people say it's about the same, and actually what they have done is they have committed what is called the small sample fallacy, which is the tendency to believe that smaller samples are more representative of the population. But what many people have ignored is the law of large numbers, which essentially states that the larger the sample, the more likely it will be representative of the population. Okay, so more such days where more than 60% of the babies born are boys is actually more likely in a smaller hospital than in a larger one. Okay, I'm going to present you with another situation. Please indicate your responses. All right, so if this question were to be posed to people, they would say it's option B, that Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. But let me tell you that the sample of feminist bank tellers actually is much smaller in number compared to that of bank tellers in general, which means the feminist bank tellers is actually a subset of the population of bank tellers. In other words, the chances of Linda being just a bank teller is much more than Linda being a feminist bank teller. But what you've done is you have read the descriptions and accordingly made a judgment. Okay, and in this case, you have committed what is called a conjunction fallacy, or the tendency on the part of people to believe that the conjunction of two events, in this case being a bank teller and active in the feminist movement, is much more likely than the constituent events alone. But the correct answer to this question is option A and not option B. Okay, so these are three principles of representativeness heuristic. Okay,
Dr. Nadat, uh,
yes.
the students are responding in the chat box. There we can't see, but I'm seeing they're responding continuously to your question, and there are a lot of answers coming in the chat box.
Wonderful.
Probably you will not be able to see because we're going YouTube live, but a lot of responses I can see that for the questions you're asking.
Great, great to hear that.
Okay.
So these are three principles of representativeness heuristic, which I just discussed through the examples that I gave. Okay. Another interesting bias I'm going to talk about is the confirmation bias. Okay. Now, as you can see on this slide, there are 4 cards, right? There's a letter on one side of each card and a number on the other side. Now, your task is to indicate the minimum number of cards you would need to turn over to test the rule. If there's a vowel on one side, then there's an even number on the other side. So, which cards do you think need to be picked up to test this rule? Okay, I can see that quite a few people might indicate it's E and 4, right? But let me tell you which cards you need to turn over to test the following rule. Okay, now this is a task which relies on the principle of falsification. So you have to pick up the cards which would falsify this rule, okay, to test this rule. So actually you have to pick up E and 7. Now for example, if you turn over E and on the other side you see an even number, then the rule gets confirmed, correct? But if it's an odd number on the other side, then the rule gets falsified, which means we definitely have to pick up this card. Okay, now when you turn over K, regardless of whether the number on the other side is even or odd, okay, it becomes irrelevant to the rule, which means K is not the card we should pick up. Now, what happens? Quite a few people also say 4, okay, because what happens here is if you pick up 4 and on the other side it's a vowel, the rule gets confirmed. But if it's a consonant, then the rule becomes irrelevant. But actually, what did I say? You have to pick up the cards which falsify the rule. Okay, just because A leads to B doesn't mean B leads to A. Okay, so you have reversed the cause and effect relationship here. Okay, so in this case we should not pick up card 4. Okay, but we should pick up card with number 7, because if it's a vowel on the other side, then the rule gets falsified. Okay, but by picking up card on which number 4 is printed, you actually have committed what is called the confirmation bias, the tendency on the part of people to select information that goes well with their worldviews and ignore the one which does not. Okay, so for instance, let's say if I were to ask you, if I were to tell you that I am an introvert, which question are you more likely to ask me? How often do you spend time in the library alone? Or how often do you spend time chatting up with your friends in a coffee shop? I'm sure many of you would ask the first question, right? And by doing so, you have committed what is called the confirmation bias. Okay. Now, the question that many people also want answers to is yes, studying psychology is fascinating, is interesting, but what is it that we can do with the knowledge of psychology? Okay, now I'm going to talk about different careers that students can pursue with a degree in psychology, some which are conventional and some which are unconventional. Now, typically, when I talk about thriving and flourishing in one's career as a psychologist, doing a bachelor's degree is not enough. Okay, you have to go for further studies and complete at least a master's program, and I also recommend that you also go for doctoral studies, because having a PhD degree actually puts you at an edge over other candidates who do not have this qualification. Okay, so one conventional career that quite a few students of psychology pursue is that of being an academician or a researcher, which means as an academician you teach courses in psychology like I do at Flame. I also do research and I also have administrative responsibilities. But to be an academician today, you need to have a PhD degree, without which becoming a full-time professor is next to impossible. Okay. Now, there are some people who may not want to teach, but they love research like anything. Okay. And they can actually work as a researcher in organizations like WHO or even CDC. When I talk about CDC, it's basically Center for Disease Control. Okay, this is one of the leading organizations in US. The second career, which often many people fancy about, is being a clinical psychologist. Okay, now as a clinical psychologist, you typically uh, diagnose and assess and treat people with severe mental illnesses like clinical anxiety and depression, schizophrenia, somatoform disorders, okay, and so on. Now, typically, clinical psychologists work in hospitals. Many of them also work as private practitioners. Some of them work in NGOs and even rehab centers. Now, in India, to practice as a clinical psychologist, you need to complete at least an MPhil in clinical psychology from an RCI recognized institution. So, when I say RCI, it stands for the Rehabilitation Council of India. Okay, but in US you need to have a PhD or a PsyD. Okay, PsyD basically stands for Doctor of Psychology. Another profession or vocation which also has been quite popular among psychologists is that of being a counselor. Now, counselor is someone who works with people who do not have very severe mental health problems, but who have issues which prevent them from functioning effectively in daily life. Could be, for example, conflicts at home. Could be, for instance, even like what to do next after class 10 or class 12. Okay, in terms of like selecting the right careers and so on. Okay, now like clinical psychologists, counselors also work as private practitioners. They work in NGOs. Okay, and quite a few counseling psychologists also work in schools where they look after, for instance, the issues of academic problems and behavioral issues that students display. Okay, and then they conduct appropriate intervention. Another lucrative career in psychology is to become an industrial or organizational psychologist. Now, as an industrial organizational psychologist, you typically address issues that employees would face at workplace. Right? There are times when you feel so low, काम करने का बिल्कुल नहीं मन करता, right? There are days you just feel like let's just drag it somehow, right? कभी कभार आपका परफॉर्मेंस प्रोडक्टिविटी में ड्रॉप होता है, क्या करें जिससे आपका परफॉर्मेंस प्रोडक्टिविटी ऊपर आ जाए, राइट? नाउ ऑल्सो लाइक organizations have to develop surveys and assessments to gauge employee performance and certain other issues, right? So then also an industrial organizational psychologist looks after all these issues. Okay, and also they look into the issues of how can the hiring process be made more efficient. Okay, so that with respect to selection, placement, and even like reducing attrition or dropout rates. Okay, another interesting career which also has caught momentum in India is that of being a sports psychologist. Okay, now sports psychologists typically focus on the ways in which the motivation, morale, and self-efficacy of sports people can be improved. Okay, so there are times when, for instance, there's a lot of pressure on athletes and sports people to perform, right? And that can be a source of stress and anxiety for them. So sports psychologists typically address these issues that athletes or sports person could face. Okay, they also like act as at times as coach to help athletes and even sports people perform better. Okay, so they typically work either as private consultants or they also like work with sports associations. Okay, now I'm going to also talk about some unconventional careers in psychology. Okay, one is that of being a forensic psychologist. I'm sure many of you may have heard of forensic science, right? It's to do with crime, right? So forensic psychologists typically they try to examine the personality or attributes of a criminal. They also like provide expert testimony. They also try to gauge the eyewitness testimony. So for example, there are times when someone sees crime happening in front of their eyes, right? Now, typically forensic psychologists also talk to the eyewitnesses and they also evaluate the testimonies or narrations that they offer. Okay, in certain cases they also look into the issues of child abuse. Okay, another career that psychology students can think of is to become an ergonomist or human factors engineer. Right now, increasingly with technology, right, we also are using a lot of equipments, right? We have Alexa at home, we have laptops, right? We have a lot of devices which have made things easier for us, right? Now, ergonomists and human factors engineers think of ways in which machines can be made more people friendly. Okay, how they can be made more easy for people to use and interact with, right? Now, I'm sure some of you in the crowd may also be inclined towards fine arts, right? Could be in terms of painting, sketching, doodling, dancing, right? Now, also, we have uh, a career of being an art therapist. Okay, this is something which you can pursue with a degree in psychology. Many people who typically do masters in counseling psychology, then they go into art therapy, okay, and they do certain super specialized courses, right? So typically through various art forms, okay, you're able to express and communicate your emotions, and this is what is the crux of many art therapies which have been proposed. Okay, there's also now a new career which is coming up in psychology, and that is aviation psychology. So as an aviation psychologist, you try to identify the ways in which the performance of flight crew, pilot, airline staff can be enhanced. How can, for example, flight decks be designed? Okay, how to think about like how much seating space is like leg space is sufficient. Okay, they also investigate issues of airline crashes and also like identify what are the safety practices that organizations need to airlines need to basically adhere to make the experience better for everybody. Okay, and the last career I'm going to talk about is that of being an environmental psychologist. Now, as an environmental psychologist, you try to understand how environment influences, for instance, the way you think, feel, and behave, and how is it that the way you do things influences the environment that you are a part of. Okay, so typically many environmental psychologists focus on issues of urban planning, okay, and they also work with, for instance, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and even sometimes they also enter academics. Okay, they also look into issues of, for instance, as I said, urban planning, even like designing efficient workplaces and homes. Okay, so these are issues that environmental psychologists look into. Right now, what is it that, so you may ask, with a degree, BA degree in psychology from Flame, what have students done after that? Okay, now many students, I'll tell you, they have gone abroad to universities like Harvard, Boston, UCLA, Penn State, Drexel, Queensland University of Technology, and some have also gone to pursue their internships at the Max Planck Institute of Psycholinguistics. Okay, and they also have working as consultants. Some of them have also interned at hospitals like Qantas. Okay, so now I will hand over to Sai, who's going to talk about her experience of studying psychology at Flame. Sai is a final year undergraduate student who is majoring in psychology and minoring in HR. Over to you, Sai.
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening, everyone. Like sir mentioned, I am a third year student at Flame University, and yeah, I am a psychology major. So, talking about so I actually studied science till my 12th grade, and and but I wasn't sure what to do after that, and I definitely did not want to continue with science. So that's when I got to know about Flame University. And I was very intrigued by their liberal education system, where we can actually choose a combination of subjects from across streams. So we can have combinations of
I think there is some technical issue with Sai. Dr. Patwardhan, I can discuss few things with you when her issues get resolved. We get her in.
Sure.
My, it was a very interesting session we had, and I learned a lot about psychology. I mean, super specialties in the field of psychology, even aviation psychology. That's very interesting. That's really interesting. Do they actually teach aviation psychology? Like, is it a subfield nowadays in master's program?
It's an upcoming field in psychology. It's not yet integrated into formal academic curriculum so far, but soon it's likely to get
That's
integrated.
amazing. That's interesting. We're going to have a lot of we need psychologists, especially during COVID times. I feel it's like a requirement in hospital setups in each department. I feel every department should have a psychologist associated with them. Very intriguing
Absolutely.
and very interesting. I love this field, and I have so many students who want to do psychology. So this was something really I was looking forward to this discussion. Okay, and students want to know that if they have not taken psychology in class 11th and 12th, can they still pursue psychology in Flame University during the bachelor's?
Absolutely. So we believe in this idea of what is called tabula rasa, which means even if you haven't studied psychology in class 11 and class 12, that's fine. Okay, you can
Okay.
still opt for courses in psychology and go ahead to do a major in this discipline.
Wonderful. And does taking biology help students? One of the students had just asked in the chat box. I believe biology does help students in pursuing psychology, right? And okay, and one another important question which normally comes up is what is the difference between BA psychology and BSc psychology, and what are the career prospects of the two streams? What is the difference, and what can they do afterwards after doing the education?
Okay, so to answer your question first regarding is biology an important prerequisite for studying psychology? My answer is in a way yes, but what is important is to have that fundamental knowledge of biology. So even if you haven't done biology in class 11 or class 12, that's fine. Okay, whatever you learned till class 10 is sufficient to like study psychology because we have a course called biological or physiological psychology which tries to understand the biological basis of behavior. So what exactly is happening physiologically when for instance we feel angry or when we are like very excited or when we feel happy. Yeah, so fundamental knowledge of biology is enough. Now, to come to the second question about what is the difference between BSc and BA, I'm also going to answer one more question in terms of how this BA psychology program at Flame is actually like bringing out the best of both the worlds and also bringing in some new value added features. Okay. Now, to answer this question, typically a BSc psychology program focuses more on field exposure and training. So, if you go back to the Bloom's taxonomy, which we talked about at the beginning, typically, BA programs focus on knowledge and comprehension. But BSc programs will go a step ahead and they'll try to like apply the knowledge at a certain level. But in a BA psychology program at Flame University, we also like go steps beyond application to analyze, to evaluate, and to synthesize information. So you're almost like at the top of the ladder. Now it's a choice about where you want to be, at the top or the bottom of the ladder.
Okay, so
So
I believe Flame University being a liberal arts university,
yes.
so they would be declaring their major after a year or year and a half, right?
So
So
typically students pursue their majors from the second year onwards. So in the first
okay.
year, towards the third semester, the end of the third semester or the beginning of the fourth semester, they have to declare their majors and their minors. So they can also have an option of like opting for open minors, which means they can take courses from different disciplines or areas which are there at Flame University.
So I believe I just want to convey to the student body who are listening to us that they can also fulfill the criteria of declaring the major. If they've not done anything in high school, probably they can do it during their first 3 semesters and declare the majors in psychology.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, and being a liberal arts university, diversity is very important
Yes.
in college. I want to know about Flame University. How diverse is the student body out there?
So at Flame University, we have students coming from different parts of India. right from Jammu Kashmir and Punjab in the north to Kanyakumari in the south, and from Ahmedabad in the west. And there are students even from the northeast at Flame University. So it's like an extremely diverse student community that we have at Flame. So that way, it brings innumerable opportunities for actually like learning about new cultures and also shed some of the prejudices and misconceptions we may have about other communities. So it's a great learning experience for students.
That's Flame is a very popular destination, at least in this part of India. I know a lot of students want to join Flame. And okay, there's one very important question which students want to know is what is Flame's scholar program? Like, is it applicable for all majors?
So Flame Scholars program is, in a way, it's like a postgraduate diploma. It's a fourth year. Now there are students, for instance, who may want to go to US or to Australia for their higher studies, and many American and Australian universities they expect students to complete 16 years of education. So this Flame Scholars program takes care of the fourth year.
Okay, that's a good thing. It is a requirement, and I think that helps in applying for masters as well. When they've
Yes,
done 1 year of research program, that helps them to apply for master's program as well.
absolutely.
And Flame is actually very popular with two programs. I want you to enumerate those pointers like Discover India program and the Summer Internship program. So, Dr. Patwardhan, I want the student body to know what are these two programs and how are students involved.
Okay, so one thing which I talked about at the beginning about the Flame experience is that we focus on experiential learning, right? Now, often we are not attuned to what is happening around us because we may be living in our own bubbles. So, the Discover India program is one such initiatives which help us connect with different segments of a society. So, students can study different aspects of Indian society, such as art, history, culture, even environment and ecology, and even how technology is impacting different populations. So there are students who have gone to different parts of the country. For instance, last year I took students to a village called Pipalantri, which is a village where every time a female child is born, 111 trees are planted. So this is a practice which is there in this village, and we went along. I and a group of 15 students. We went to this village to understand this practice in depth. We interviewed the people there, what their experiences have been, and how this practice actually has changed things for better in that village. So there are
That's
different
awesome.
areas that you can choose, and you can actually go to for your field visit, and then do a detailed research work on that topic. Yeah.
That's incredible. And what about summer internship program? What is it?
So summer internship program is typically it takes place between your fourth and the fifth semester. So after you complete 2 years of the program, before you like enter the final year, that summer break is used for interning in an organization. But this organization should be conducting work in the area that you are majoring in. So, for example, if I am a psychology major, I should work in an organization which deals with issues related to psychology. Could be like in a corporate setup, could be in an NGO, could be in a private practice setup, or could be even in a hospital or a school setting. So you actually get to see how the principles and theories of psychology, which are taught to students in the class, how they actually manifest in the real life settings or real life situations. So
Well,
this
does
typically
Flame
takes place for 8 months, 8 weeks. Sorry.
okay?
Yeah.
Does Flame help them to get internships? Like, do they have some kind of an arrangement, or students have to apply on their own?
So we do have a list of organizations which offer
Okay.
internships, and we do share them with the students when they are in the fourth semester. So they can basically start uh, looking for the organizations which fit in with their interests.
Okay, that's great. Well, Flame University is a liberal arts university, and it is different from our traditional universities. So, what exactly should a student do during their high school when when they have to apply for Flame? What are the basic requirements which
So
they should be considering? Yeah.
yeah. So to basically, if you want to study psychology or any discipline at Flame from a liberal education perspective, there are a few prerequisites that you need to meet. Now we have our institute entrance exam called FEAT. It's called Flame Entrance Aptitude Test. Okay. Now some of you may have also given exams like SAT or ACT. Okay, should you have taken these exams and have the scores in hand, you are exempted from taking the FEAT exam. Okay, but all the applicants will have to appear for the they will have to take an online essay, and they also, for instance, will have to like go through an online one-way interview where certain questions will be posed to them and they have to respond to them. So that's like the basic requirement for getting admission into the program.
Okay. And is Flame providing scholarships to students?
Yes. So typically, to answer this question, Flame does provide merit-based scholarships for students who have a
Okay.
very good academic performance. Okay. So the thing is, typically, some students will get a full scholarship, some students get a partial scholarship. Okay. Now, this scholarship will be provided to students for the full duration of the program, like right since they start their program till the
Okay.
program.
Okay.
Okay. Now the thing is, there's an expectation that you are supposed to maintain a minimum CGPA of 7.5.10 across the semesters. Okay. Now,
Okay.
if over 2 semesters, say for example, your CGPA drops below 7.5, then you may not be able to continue with the scholarship. Okay. Now, also, like another thing is that those students who get scholarships, they are expected to work for minimum of 12 hours a week in an NGO which is associated with Flame. So there's some social service activities that students have to engage in.
Okay.
It's a minimum of 12 hours a week.
That's an interesting thing to learn from you. And say you're back in screen. There were some technical issues, I believe. Okay, and to you, I want to know about the clubs at Flame. What kind of clubs do you have, and which clubs have you been associated with?
Um, there are actually a lot of clubs, uh, right from cultural, music, dance, theater, also sports club. Like there's a sports club for every sport at Flame, and there are even a few management clubs. So, and there's no limit on how many clubs you can be a part of. So I was a part of. I mean, I would say I was an active part of a music club, the tennis club, the volleyball club, and also the theater club. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And I just had a chat with Dr. Patwardhan about the Discover India program. So, was your experience in Discover India program?
I think that was the highlight. That was one of the highlights of my UG life, I would say, because my group, we had gone to Kolkata and we were researching on the Armenian community in Kolkata. So we are actually open to choosing any topic of our choice, which can be, and the research place can be anywhere in India. So we were a group of 15, and we actually had to go to Kolkata, and we had to develop contacts, and we had to interview a lot of people over there, and we had our research aims and hypotheses. So we had to kind of gather information and analyze that information to actually, make an entire comprehensive report as well as a documentary. So that was a very interesting experience, I'd say, because I got to learn a lot from it, because right from, working with a team who has different work ethics from yours, to actually learning how to write a research report, because we were actually into a primary research activity. So what we do at college is more of a secondary research, where we, read articles and papers of different people or of different researchers. But here we were on the field and researching ourselves. So I think that was a more um, holistic approach to understanding research.
I'm having such an interesting time here with Dr. Patwardhan, giving us those examples of his psychological testing, and you telling us about your Discover India program, how FLAME is, I think it's synonymous with experiential learning, how they teach you by examples, by experience. It's awesome. I love the curriculum at FLAME. It's incredible, I should say. I mean, it's a beautiful experience which children are going through. Okay, what about your residential complex? I would want to know a bit about your residential and your dining halls. Students would want to know who are going to join in fall 2021.
Uh, so there are three different styles of residential. There are three different residential styles. One is where you share your room with a partner, and there's an attached bathroom and everything. So, and another one is where you have the air conditioning systems there, and you have again an attached bathroom. And there's one where you can have an individual room also. So it depends on what you really want, what you prefer, and that's how you will be assigned to the room. And you have the choice of choosing your room partner after your second year. So that was about the residential part. And mess, I think we recently we had an we there's a second mess that is opened up, but unfortunately we aren't on campus right now. But otherwise, the mess timings, we have breakfast, we have lunch, we have snacks and tea at high time, and we also have dinner. And we have the mess menu. The weekly menu is provided to us every week. So yeah.
Okay, one last question from you, Dr. Patwardhan. They are study abroad programs or semester abroad. So our students would want to know what it is like and with whom do you have collaborations with?
Okay, so at Flame, we have what is called a global exchange program. So this is a program where students who are pursuing their studies at Flame, they get to spend one semester at a university abroad. So we have tie-ups with universities in US, Canada, Germany, and France. So for instance, in US, we have tie-ups with universities, colleges like Wellesley, Babson, Amherst. In Canada, we have tie-ups with York University and even King's College. In Germany with DHBW, and in France with Sciences Po. And for the global exchange program, the selection is based on merit, depending on the availability of seats in those colleges, and also based on the approval of the host institution. So even if you merely fulfill the eligibility requirement, it does not entitle a student to claim a study seat in the study abroad program.
Okay. Well, I would want to wrap up this session, though I would have many other questions to ask. Maybe next session. Thank you so much, Dr. Patwardhan, and thank you so much, Say, to be joining us for this speaker series event. And thank you for the lovely audience that we have here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Neeru, and thank you, audience, for attending the session. I hope you gathered some really interesting insights.
Thank you.